so much for joining me today and sharing your story. It's such an amazing story, and one that I'm excited that gets to be told, because the county, Hawaii County, and everybody here owes you and your family such a debt that can just never be repaid. So really appreciate you taking the time to come over and do this. We're thrilled to have you here.
I appreciate being here. Of course, the subject is not a happy one.
You were the impetus and the driving force behind the police memorial wall that we have here at the Hilo police station, which was created as a result of your brother being killed in the line of action in 1990. We featured him as part of our 80 for 80 series. What do you want the public to know about your brother?
My brother and what he was to me, I think, I'd like to think that they're both similar in a way, and that is, my brother could not say no to me. From small to big, whatever the issue was, whether there was a rock that I thought was very attractive, that it appealed to me because of its shape, he took it out from between two boulders with an OO. In recounting what it is that happened that led to his death, he was no different the person, because he was actually coming off duty the night when...
And we're talking about Officer Ronald Jitchaku.
Yes. He was coming off duty and he received a call. I forget the terminology, but it was all island called, calling the officers for help, because many of the officers, this was during an eruption when families have to evacuate, and in the process to protect their homes, the police have to go to their homes to make certain that things are not taken from their homes while they're away. And so he realized that they were short-handed and a melee had broken out at Banyan Drive. As I said, he was coming off duty, but he went directly to Banyan Drive to help. There were only 2 officers there. My feelings about this started with anger. You know, he's there to help a situation. He gets killed in a situation like that. But I think for the first time, I had an inkling into what his job was about. I don't think until that moment I ever considered the dangerous aspect. I mean, I knew police work was not something that was going to be like working in an office like I did. But I don't think I fully understood the weight of what it is they have to respond to, because many of those situations can be life and death.
You channeled your grief in a very unique way after your brother was killed in the line of duty. Explain how you decided to go that route, because it's not something that everybody would do.
I didn't know I was channeling my grief, but in fact, I guess that's an appropriate way to describe it. What happened when I received the call that he had been killed, I remember reacting with an outburst of grief. And the following day, when I was flying to Hilo from Honolulu, I was just tearing, and I didn't want anyone to be preoccupied with coming over to offer any consolation. So I took a piece of paper out and I started writing. And basically what I wrote was, in his life he was my rock, in his passing he becomes my monument. And I wasn't still thinking of doing a memorial. But I came to Honolulu. I left Honolulu to come to Hilo because I wanted to be with my family. When I was invited to the chief's office, I was directed to his office where other officers who had been killed in the line of duty had pictures on his bookshelf. And I remembered feeling a bit slighted, I have to tell you, that all that was in memory of these men who died in the service of their work was a photograph on a bookshelf. When I went back to Honolulu, I went to that police station to see how fallen officers were honored. And what I saw there was almost equally disturbing. It was like a metal table tent on the floor, and it had these plaques that you usually see on koa bowls, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And every name had one of those metal strips with brass strips with their names and the dates on it.
And this was at Honolulu Police Department headquarters.
This is when their police department was located. Interestingly, the police department took over the old Sears Roebuck department store that I worked at when I was putting myself through college. Now it was converted to a police station before they built their new one. When I saw how they were, quote, honored, I remember talking to one of the officers there, and he said, "You should talk to Sister Roberta Derby." And she was the, they referred to her, there was a special name they gave her, but she was like the honorary police officer who accompanied especially during a time when a police officer lost his partner, she would accompany that officer because she was helping that person process the grief they were feeling over losing their partner. And she said to me that she was the only one they could express that grief to. And here I was, in a way, doing the same thing. I was trying to be brave for the rest of my family. So the two of us had our opportunity to console each other in private tears. And then when she learned that, I felt something needed to be done to honor officers. She said that she felt the Lord had selected me to do this. It seemed like an odd thing for her to say, and yet, in a way, I love my brother so much. And as a designer, if I did not see something that I felt gave them proper honor, then I should do something about it. And that was the impetus.
Is your background conducive to architectural design? Or
No. I'm a graphic designer.
Which makes this all the more remarkable.
I deal in inches. I don't deal in feet. I don't deal in outdoor structural things. So, let me tell you, one of the first things I did was I was looking, I first started, I'll make it brief, but there were two different approaches. One was, as I mentioned to you, my brother was my rock. In his passing, he became my monument. So I immediately started with this shape, and because I know that the police are thin blue line, it was this structure, a rock kind of a structure that was tall and narrow. And on the narrow side, I had a blue light running all the way up to represent symbolically the thin blue line. And then on the front of it, which was a wider surface, I started with a circle, and the dedication was at the bottom. The reason it was a circle, the police used to have a light atop their car that was circular and it spun. when my brother passed away, there was to be a procession that was going to come down Kapiolani. And my father insisted that he was going to ride with her in the hearse. And I said, you're not going to ride alone. And I got in the seat next to him. And as we drove along Kapiolani, as we approached the station, officers were lined. They were lining Kapiolani, and they were standing there saluting. And I said to him, salute back to them. And here we were in the hearse with its round light spiraling. That became how I started with the design. That is why there was a circle, because of the way the light was that I remembered, and the thin blue line. It went through a number of iterations. When I showed it to my family, my sister said to me, you've lived away from home too long. We have earthquakes here. And I went, oh my gosh, that's right. It cannot be a thin slab because it would snap with the earthquake.
Now, how tall were you envisioning this monument to be?
10 feet.
Oh, okay.
And
And where were you envisioning it to go?
in between the two flagpoles.
Oh, front of police headquarters here in Hilo.
It's kind of a reminder of me coming down Kapiolani, you know. So it was going to stand there. And so anyway, it started as the slab. My sister said, you know, that's not gonna work. So I widened it into a square and at the bottom, and it tapered to the top, and it was flat on the top. I called a friend of mine, is a professor, Tom Cloby, who was a professor in art. And I asked him to critique it for me. And he said, the birds are gonna roost on it. So I put a point
You're
on
batting 1,000 at this point.
Oh, God. So I put a point on it, and I looked at that shape and I said, that reminds me of the Washington Monument. I wonder if this is how it started. Anyway, that was my first kidding moment about something so serious. Then I was intending it to be between the flagpoles, except when I talked to Chief Vieira. He brought me here into this structure, which has a recess as you enter in the stairwell. And he asked me where I thought I was going to put that, and I told him between the two flagpoles. He said, no, you can put it here. And as far as I was concerned, I was not doing an indoor monument. My feeling was that police work is done in the public. Why are we hiding our honor in their name, in their sacrifice, in a stairwell? I mean, it offended me, just like I was not happy about seeing pictures on a bookshelf. I was not happy about putting it in the stairwell. And so because I was insisting, I pursued the idea. One of the places was going to be in the landing between the structures, the public structure and this administration. And then the thought of putting that much weight on it changed, because you cannot put that much weight on there. And so it was going to go down on the ground level. And I thought, okay, if I can put it somewhere, it might have to go where the bins were, and they can always be moved someplace else. So that was going on. The years went.
This was a long time.
Oh, it was. All kinds of considerations. And by the way, one of the, I think I'd like to mention this, one of the reasons that I considered even putting it on that landing, Don Canario, who also served as an officer with my brother, he and Greg Esteban were the two who kept me going with it, okay? And when I told them originally where I had intended to put it, Don Canario says, we don't come that way. That's a public entrance. We come in through the back. Why don't you put it on the landing? And so there was always a reason why a certain place was considered. And by the time I ran out of choices and places and ran out of a chief who was willing to allow it, and all of them for the same reason. When my brother passed away, there was going to be a delay between the time that we were going to have his services and when the autopsy was being performed. Because of the condition in which he faced his death, there was going to have to be an autopsy to determine how he died, because it would determine the charge against the individual. In that waiting period, I had a cross made and put on Banyan Drive where we could take lays in remembrance of him until we were ready to put him in his final resting place. Every time I came to Hilo, I came with a lay to put on my brother's cross. And this one particular time when I came, there was no cross. And in confusion, I stood there kind of like looking up, more to look up in wonderment to figure out why would the cross be gone. And all of a sudden I noticed that there were flowers on the trees. And then when I studied it, I realized that there were lays that had been thrown up into the trees. His cross was gone and lays were strewn all over the trees.
And that must have been so heartbreaking.
Oh, I came here and I had the police memorial that I had modified. And when I came here to see the chief, he was angry and upset. And I realized I could not talk about where I wanted to put the memorial, because what he said to me was, he told me what happened. The cross was strewn across the street. When the officers found it, they came to him with the bits and pieces of it. And they were furious over what had happened. And the chief had spent his morning trying to calm them down. And now he ends up with me in his office talking about doing something like that. What he envisioned was what I could do with that monument. The same outcome would happen as happened with the cross. If they did not respect something as universally respected as a cross, how would they respect a person-made monument? And that's why he was driven to keeping it in the stairwell.
That's why he wanted it inside, so as not subjected to potential vandalism.
Yes. So every chief I faced afterwards told me the same thing, no.
How many chiefs did you work with?
4.
Because you spent 20, 25 years?
25 years.
25 years getting this memorial built. That's just incredible and yet insane at the same time.
Okay, there is one thing I'm going to read for this reason. I questioned what I was doing because it was being questioned by so many, but especially by Chief Vieira when I first started. And after I started hearing these different reasons, I questioned whether what I was doing was even the way I should pay tribute, because I meant to honor their sacrifice. I did not mean for them to be hurt doubly by having been killed in the line of duty and now having this memorial in their honor be destroyed. And so I was really challenged at that point. And so I kind of reflected on this, and I knew that the obsession I had was driven by the love of my brother. And I decided I needed to take a more universal, detached position on this and to look at why it is we even build memorials. And I want to read you this. In a way, it was with one seating that I ended up writing this. And it's odd that I'm telling you I'm going to read it, because you would think that I contemplated on it so much I should be able to know it by heart. But I really, this is my feeling at the time, that the words somehow came through to me. And I've had that kind of respect for that. It's only 4 lines. Memorials are history's messengers of our values. They are the silent sentries of our aspirations. Memorials provide a lasting legacy of our humanity. They bridge our immortal ties with greatness.
That's awesome.
After I wrote that, I never turned back. I was going to build it no matter what. I was born in Pepe'ekeo, okay? I'm a Hawaii product. Lived in Hilo for 3 years before going to Kamehameha, where I was a boarder for 6 years before graduating and before going to the University of Hawaii, and then living there and so forth. I said, they don't even know you here. And it matters who introduces you, kind of a phrase. By then I was, I had my family, had my business and all of this. I said, so what is it that you're supposed to do to get this done? And I decided, who introduces, that phrase, who introduces you matters? I was on the same, on the Queen's Medical Board with Queen's Foundation. I was on 5 different boards for Queen's, so I'm confusing which one he was on with me, but I think it was the foundation, Barry Taniguchi. He and I served on the Queen's Foundation and other boards, by the way, but in particular at that time. So I knew how well respected he was on this island. And I decided I needed him to be the messenger. So I produced my designs to him and asked him what he thought and if he thought that the police deserved this honor. And I chose not to mention my brother's name because I wanted him to look at it collectively. And he thought, yes, it was a good idea. And he said, I know the chief, Harry Kubujiri. Let me see if I can talk to him. Within a week, I was getting a phone call from the chief's office. I'm sure it was Lynn. And so I immediately flew to Hawaii, and we went immediately to his office, and there were, I think, 4 different individuals seated in the room. He didn't have his hat on, so I didn't know who the chief was even. But I figured he had to be the one at the head of the table. And so I kind of directed my remarks to him. And at that point, you have to remember now, this is like, I'm looking at this as my last chance, but I wanted them to know what I had been through to get this done so that they would appreciate how serious I was. This was not a passing fancy. I was going to build it.
And how many years into the project was this?
I did not get the approval until we dedicated it in 2016. I think about 3 years prior. So after I'm done with it wasn't a rant, believe me, it wasn't. It was an appeal. He said, we're going to go outside. I want to show you something. He said, and then when he led us out, he turned to me and he said, it needs to be there. And he said, originally in this long strip, the fire department was supposed to be located there. And this was to be like the safety center complex, where you have the fire department, police department, so forth. But they already were located elsewhere. So he said, you can have that. I need the upper portion. I'm going to build something here. And he turned to me and he said, it's more tranquil here. I looked at him and I thought, thank you, for even considering the sense of its presentation. But at the same time, this is me being the artist now, designer, I was cringing inside because I said, I have to redesign this memorial.
How come?
Because I designed it to go between two flagpoles. Now I'm given a parcel of land. The proportion of what you build has to fit the proportion of where you put it. And that was going to look like a pencil in that area.
Because we're talking the big grassy field
Right,
across from that.
that was not going to work there at all.
Yeah.
So I thanked him and I went to my niece's home, and this is Shige's daughter. And because she knew every time I came here, I always imposed on her to pick me up, to take care of me for the day and get me back to the airport. And I said to her, well, I have good news. She said, what is that? I said, I got a parcel of land from the chief. She goes, oh, Auntie. And I said, this is the bad news. I have to start over. Well, I have to know what it is that's happening in Hawaii with the different memorials and monuments. So how about you just drive me around, Hilo area? And
you said this to your niece?
Yes. So we got in the car and we started driving around, and I just asked this rhetorical question: why do we build memorials? I mean, years before I had written that thing about memorials to determine whether I do it or not, and here I was asking why we build it. But this is how I answered it. It's like a group hug in perpetuity. A group hug in perpetuity became the inspiration. What you see out there is an open arm.
It really is.
It is ready to receive the people, and the memorial that acknowledges them is the heart of it. So that's why it is what it is. Then I didn't know how to scale it. So I spent months driving to different locations where I could see rock walls, and from the example I would determine how high I was going to build
So
it.
what led you to a rock wall as opposed to anything else?
I didn't know what else to build this. Well, I knew I wanted granite for the names, but in Hawaii we build rock walls. So that's why, and I felt that would be easier to build this form. And so that's how, and I found exactly the wall that I wanted to use as an example of the height. It was the height I was looking for. I needed something that would be strong, but not overly monumental, because you still have to be able to read the names. And the highest point needed to be, so I knew the highest point was going to be the header panel, but where you read the names, it had to be at a height where you could, and everything, when I design signs, you should always look at the height. Typical height is 5 feet. So I knew it couldn't be much more above 5 feet where you're going to read the names. And I was looking at in perpetuity, so I had to figure out how wide that would be. And so when I created the design for the wall, if you look at it, it tapers outward for support, because it's that long and that wide, it had to taper to have a wider base. But in the front section, it's straight, because in the event of the names have to be added, it had to be on a straight, flat surface. So they had to cut every single one of these stones. Oh, and the other thing I said was, I don't want to see any cement fillers. No small fillers. And this is a person who never built a rock wall before. But I knew what I wanted. I wanted a monument, and I didn't want it. I wanted it a rock wall, yes, but not looking like a rock wall. It was a monument. So that's all I could say, without fillers.
So you told them you wanted a rock wall that didn't look like a rock wall.
It had to be a monument, a memorial.
What was their reaction when you said that?
Oh, I don't know, and I was, I wasn't concerned about what, I was concerned about what they would come up with. Because I didn't know that it would mean cutting the face of a rock and then shaping it and the funny thing is, when I talked to the person who was gonna do the granite, and I was talking about this curvature, he said, you can't curve granite. I mean, hello. So that's when I came up with the design where it was going to be flat in the area where the panels would be, and then it would curve thereafter.
And so Chief Kubajiri gave his blessing in, say, 2013, you were saying?
Around
And it
that
still
time.
took 3 years
Yes,
to get it built.
yes. The rest of the collection of contributions was a bit hard because now I had to go to companies. Up until then, they were primarily, individuals. Yes, I did talk to businesses and such. When I first started, by the way, the fundraising gets to be an issue. I had a committee at the very beginning, but after so long, people move and people get.
25 years is a long time.
I didn't have anybody left, so I was the.
And I understand it was your dad
Oh, okay.
contributed
So
part of.
Here I was at the very beginning, where I told you I was weighing this thing about how I do this or not. He, because they don't get the beneficiary check immediately. But when he did, he endorsed it, and he gave me the check, and he said, "Go build your brother's memorial." That was the first contribution. Now, here I was getting.
That's extraordinary.
Okay, so here I am getting a no for an answer from the chief, and I'm getting a check, and I mean, there's a whole lot to process in all of this. But, going back to, when the wall is finally built, the whole issue about how I know that there are always floral tributes, and many times it's leis. And I even considered putting nails so that people could hang the leis. My husband and I took a trip to Paris, and we went to the Notre Dame, and this is long before the fire. And the first instructions we got when we got there was no floral offerings on the altar. And I remembered thinking, oh, that's right. Flowers die. I don't need to make a mockery of their death by putting a dead lei on that monument. I called back to Hilo and I said, I will explain later. But the 2 things I had left them instructions on, I withdrew. We're not going to put anything up there where they can put leis immediately on that altar.
I understand that rocks have special significance to your family. So, can you talk about that a little?
My father's favorite hobby was collecting rocks, but never from a heiau. I mean, my father is pure Okinawan, okay? But he knew and respected Hawaiian tradition. So he never went anywhere near a heiau. But he went to the ocean and he saw this big rock bobbing in the water. He nearly lost his truck into the water trying to, what's that word we use?
Towage? He was trying to tow it out of the ocean?
Yeah. And so, anyway, so this was the biggest discussion we ever had about any of his collection was, we called it the table rock. Why? Because he even found a way to stage it higher and so forth. So, I decided, since I was not going to have any flowers on the, what I call the altar. Oh my gosh, I have to tell you this too. Oh, while we were in Paris, I had this dream, and my brother came to me in the dream. So here I had the experience at the Notre Dame, And he appears to me in the dream, and he was standing there, and I said, Shige, what are you trying to tell me? And he just stands there. And it was like, if you ever knew my brother, he was short on talk, long on do. And all he did was stand there, just with this very soft gaze on his face. And I decided, since he didn't say anything, I have to pay attention to where he was. And then it dawned on me. I could not put that table rock like I had originally considered. I could not put the table rock in the wall. It was going where he was standing. That was his message to me. If you put that huge rock in the wall, it will be a distraction, and I should know that. I'm the designer, not him. So I called Hilo from Paris. Don't you do anything with that rock, because I had told them if we have to cut it, but I really didn't want to. So those two things, I said, you hold up on that. We're putting that rock as it is elsewhere. Do not put it in the wall.
And that's the rock that's at the,
Yes.
on the right-hand
Right.
side of the
That
monument.
is where Shige was standing in my dream.
Must have been.
And Mike Sasaki, he was incredible. He commissioned this company in Japan to do the granite, and they did it in a week.
Wow.
Do you know how long it took to clear through customs? A month. But I bring up Mike's name, and it's good I stopped there, because I didn't do work like this, so I made sure I checked for everything I did along the way. And so I told him how I wanted the type and the style and all of this. He showed me the block type. I said, no, it's not gonna be that. I knew it was not gonna be serif type. I'm very particular about typefaces, okay? So we have to do this whole compromise. But I really like it when it's deeply incised. And he said, he walked me over to the cemetery. His plant is right across the street from the cemetery.
Up in, by Honolulu?
Yes. So he takes me across, and he says, you see what happens when it's deep? And he showed me all this water stain that comes down, because the water literally gets held in that incision. He said, you're building a monument that's going to be forever. That water is going to be dripping all over, and guess where? Over the names of the people underneath. You want to do that? But I knew enough to ask. And that's, if I give myself credit for anything, it's that, number one, I asked. Number two, I listened, okay? I didn't listen to Bill Stormont. He was the one who determined what the trees would be. I wanted families to have a way of recognizing the ones that they lost by planting a tree. Something lives for the life you lost, kind of thing, you know? Right then is when the lehua disease. Now, the reason I picked the lehua was because even that I studied. Lehua doesn't grow dense, so you can see through the trees. I imagined that would be almost a kind of a forest, you know, with this wall and that. And it doesn't grow dense, so there would be a living thing. So I had all of this in mind, because I wanted it to look like a park, you know, where you could sit and contemplate. And just then, Bill Stormont, who deals with plants and trees, said, you cannot plant the lehua because of what's happening now. And he said, the ohia makes sense. The light of the police, the kukui is light, you know? So I think you should plant lehua, the kukui. So that's how, and the other reason was this, a very practical one. There are electrical lines and water lines that come through that property. They might know it when I'm calling their attention to it at the very beginning, but what's gonna happen afterwards? When you don't know where the water lines are and you dig and plant a tree, you're gonna cut into the line. So I decided, okay, I know where the lines are. I'll plant the trees where I want them. Nothing else gets planted there.
You know, you have the big unveiling. What did it mean to you to see the memorial standing and dedicated when it was finally dedicated after 25 years?
Actually, I think it was the night before that I had my, when, quote, when I'm on stage, I'm preoccupied with what the responsibility is being on stage. So I was in a whole different place. But the night before, I got a call, and it was from Brian Ishii, the fellow who oversaw the contractor. And he was talking with the electrician about the lighting and so forth. So he called me and he said, okay, I think you need to come and see it now, because I was not doing this monument only for daylight. It was also going to be at night. And that blue light I had was going to be right under the granite panel. And it was very important to me that that light be there because of the symbolic thin blue line. But when he called me, he said he and the electrician had decided that without lighting on it, you couldn't read the names or the header panel. So they set up lights to reflect on it, but they also hid it behind rocks. And they put it in at the very last, because of something else I saw, I added 3 feet of a border in front and in back of the wall. And so in that border with the gravel, they placed these rocks and they put the indirect lights on the main header panel. And I came and all 3 of us sat on the lawn in front of it. And it was my first moment of really grasping the magnitude of what this represented. Until then, it was like a job, you know. Do I do it so many inches? Do I do this, kind of thing? But it was the only moment I had where I could be there alone, whether I did the right thing for my brother. And it was, I couldn't believe it. I said, this is beautiful. And the interesting thing, I said it to myself, I didn't say it out loud because I didn't know how I could call that beautiful. Police officers who were going off duty were driving and they stopped and they got out and they took pictures. And they said, it's beautiful. They said 2 things, it's beautiful, but I don't ever want to see my name up there. And, but Brian and the electrician wanted me to come so I could experience that with them. And I think that was really quite moving. The wall is so solid. The contractor, Brian, said to me, you go stand at that end. He said, when I tap it here, you're gonna hear it, the sound.
Wow.
You know, when I talked to Billy Kanoy, who was the mayor, for help, and he said to me, after he said it this way to his staff, he said, when Auntie asked for help, I said yes. So he said, we're not gonna talk about if, we're gonna talk about how. Typical Billy Kanoy style. And the interesting thing is that it was something that he followed very carefully, and he even came to the dedication. And I always appreciated that whoever participated, at the time he told me, he said, I have to work on, I think he said 5 votes. Do you have 9 council members? Oh, that's why he said it. He said, I just have to get 5 votes. He was saying it to me as if, then we're in. Well, they all voted for it. That was something I put in writing for them too. Building a police memorial is a community endeavor. A police memorial embodies a community's character in expressing the value they place on sacrifices made in their behalf, where the price of peace is one's life. They all voted for it. But I hope they got the essence of what I was trying to say. They're not just helping. The help they gave was their life. And you're gonna quibble about it. They did not quibble. They did all agree. Like those officers said, this is beautiful, but I don't want my name on it. I'd like to think that I'm from this island, and I always refer to it as my birth island. I'm proud of it and I love it. So, in my professional career, I'm glad I could leave something to this island. And yes, I hope not too many names go on it. But when that sacrifice is made, I hope they will feel that their life has been